Yo, what's up guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to why Britain is the centre of the world, and I think this will relate to how on the globe it is, because it is, I don't know if it is actually focused on Britain being the centre, but it is in the centre. I don't know if is there different globes. Say you're from South Africa, is there going to be a different globe for you? I mean, it'll probably be the same because it's pretty central as well, but say you're from China, will the globe be different? Like let me just see, how do they see the globe in China? Will this even be what I'm searching for? Is this what they would sort of judge it as? China, and then the US, will it be the same? There's not really an option for that. But yeah, is that like in certain places, will they just center it from their country? I assume they will, but from what I see, it's this, and I always see the globes as this, and I don't really know why. And also, I think maybe it's judged off time. What is the time? What is the number one? Not number one time, but you've got BST, which is British summertime, and I don't know if that's the time that a lot of other things are judged off or what, but that might be it because it's the middle here. But we're going to see. I don't really know what else to say, but let's jump into this. Links are in the description to my Patreon if you want to see some more of my reactions that I can't post to YouTube. But let's jump into this and see why this might be the case.
Here's the original one. I think there's this misnomer that my orange coat is dead, but no, it's just dying quickly. There's just a good amount of this going on. But I think this thing has a couple more years for sure. So, this is my desk. I sit here all day and I work and I look at this map whenever I'm daydreaming. I just look at this map. I bought this map off eBay and it was in like an elementary school and now it's in my office. I notice something every time I look at it that kind of irks me. That something is this. This zero. This zero, which is not just one number, but it's actually a corresponding line that looks like this.
Oh, and it goes through London, right? I think that's what it is. It goes through London, maybe? For the time?
Let's back up here for a second. The Earth is divided into lines. Sometimes they're curved like they are on my map, and whether or not
oh no, Greenwich Mean Time, GMT. That's what I was on about.
they're curved or straight has to do with this concept of projection, which is, I'm not going to talk about here. I've talked about plenty using a knife and a globe back in an old Vox video that I made. But just know that the Earth is divided up into lines, latitude and longitude lines, ones that go up and down and ones that go from side to side. All of these lines in the grid have a number associated with them. So for the up and down lines, there's a 0 point, and then anywhere to the right of that or east of that starts to go up from 0 to 180 with a little E next to it for east of the 0 line. And then everything to the left or the west of it has the same thing, 0 to 180 with a W for west, okay? That center point is the 0 point from which all east and west things are measured. The same thing for these side-to-side lines. If you go up from here, you're going to start to get higher and higher until you get to 180 degrees north. Or if you go south, you will go 180 degrees south, which is the South Pole. Finding out where the 0 point should be for these horizontal lines is actually quite easy. The Earth has these two natural poles, which make for a natural top and bottom of the Earth. And halfway in between those two poles, you have this perfect center point, the equator, which is a very natural place to put this 0 point and to measure everything from. The up and down lines are totally arbitrary where you decide them. Like, who's to say that like it couldn't be right here in Russia and this could be 0 and everything could go west and east from here? Or Japan for that matter. Well, in fact, a long time ago, that's how it used to be. These maps with these grids were really, really important for navigating the world, and so everyone had to choose a 0 point. And most would just make their capital or their home base the 0 point. If you lived in Japan, you would just make Japan the 0 point, and the rest of the coordinates would be measured against that one 0 point, which was Japan. And same if you lived in France or Washington, D.C. This was fine because back then countries kind of just fought wars and competed with each other. They weren't really collaborating or aligning or trading as much as they do today. And so everyone could just have their own maps centered around their place, and they did just fine. But then,
is this going to go towards colonization? Will it lead to that? All the horrible things Britain done? I wouldn't be surprised.
Around the 1800s, a few things started to happen that completely changed everything.
Oh, it is.
First, countries and empires, instead of just competing and fighting with each other, started to actually say, like, we should align with each other and trade and be friends because that's better for everyone. Pair this with the fact that map making and sea navigation was becoming like a big industry. It was no longer just the king ordering maps to be made for their like expeditions, but now it was like private businesses going out and doing things that private businesses do. And so there was now like a demand for good seafaring maps. In short, map making was trending. Seems like a pretty good time to be alive. Okay, and there was one more thing that was happening around this time that was super important, which is this. Trains everywhere. Trains were just like popping up everywhere. And trains were also trending. People were now able to travel like across the country, not just like on their horses, but on this whole system of trains where you could buy a ticket, get on a train, and end up somewhere hundreds of miles away. And you know what trains run on, besides coal, is time. Timetables, schedules. How do you know when your train's gonna arrive, and when it's gonna leave, and when it's gonna get there? Time. Some universal set time. The problem is, back in the 1800s, there was no universal set time. Check out this piece of paper.
Really?
Today, all of these cities and towns would be just on Eastern Standard Time.
What the hell, man?
One time zone. But back then, every town had their own time, depending on when it was noon for them. If they were a little bit east or a little bit west of here, that would be different than in Washington, D.C. Total nightmare for trains.
See, it's weird, like, time is a made-up thing, but it also does make sense, you know? It's just so weird, man. How we live off money. It's not necessarily real, but we live off it, and it's the most important thing. Time. It's the same sort of situation, but I don't know. It's just interesting how they managed to come up with these concepts of doing this certain way.
The lifeblood of trains is time, and this time mishmash just wasn't going to work. Okay, so what does all of this have to do with this? Look at this guy. You probably don't know who this person is. I didn't know who this person was. He was the US president that no one remembers. This US president in the late 1800s saw a problem with all of this. He realized that having a bunch of different maps with a bunch of different 0 points based on whoever was making it was a problem. And he realized that not having a universal time zone or some sort of universal way of making the same time for everyone was also a problem. So he invited 41 countries to come here to Washington, D.C., where I live, and to sit around and think and talk about where this 0 point should be. Where should the center of the world be so that we can measure time as well as navigation?
So it's not to do with colonization then? God damn, I am shocked.
All maps could be normalized to this one spot. So after a moment of a bunch of white dudes sitting around in a room in Washington, D.C., which is kind of what's happening today in Washington, D.C., they came to a vote. And that vote, almost unanimously, said that the 0 line should be right here.
Come on. I thought there was going to be a deeper reason to that, though. I thought it was going to be like they forced it upon all these countries, and then it spread around, and then England or Britain done what it did best, and it took control without anyone wanting to be involved or something like that.
This line, if you zoom in, goes right through London, England. It actually goes through a little outskirts town called Greenwich. Greenwich is the home of the Royal Observatory of the British Empire. This would be the place where the prime meridian, or the 0 point for the entire world, east and west, would start. Every country at the conference agreed that this should be the case, except for the Dominican Republic, at that time called Santo Domingo. They said no. They were the one country that didn't like this proposal.
Fez.
And France and Brazil actually abstained diplomatically, which was kind of them saying like, oh, we don't agree with this. France continued to make their maps with Paris as the center point, but eventually they got on board as well. So that gets to the crux of my big question of why the 0 right there, which is a bunch of people voted on it. But why were they so down with Britain having the 0 point being in the center of the world? Well, the answer is because it was 1884, and Britain was just really good at the ocean. The British Empire was by far the biggest...
Oh god, are we getting into the colonizing now? God damn it, I thought we missed
most
it.
powerful navy. They had the most experience with maps and ocean faring, and so it was kind of a natural choice to let Britain, the king of the ocean, have this center point. And from then on, maps started to be drafted with Greenwich, this royal observatory, as the center point for the east-west divide in the world. Over time, this exact point, exactly where it's drawn, has shifted a tiny bit because of better tools to measure things, and so it's actually not literally on the Royal Observatory anymore, but it's effectively in the same place that was drawn in this 1884 conference. But they also established that all time in the entire world would be measured against this same spot, Greenwich. Noon at Greenwich, at the Royal Observatory, would be the peg against which all other time was set. They called this Greenwich Mean Time. So you end up getting a map that looks like this.
What the fuck? Oh, so it's like mirrored. Oh, this is confusing me. Is it like mirrored then? This... No, it's not mirrored at all. I thought it was mirrored for a second. It kind of looks mirrored, but it's struggling to be mirrored.
Zoom in and you see Greenwich is right here. That's GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, okay? You go west of here and you start to get GMT -1 or -2, -3. You can come all the way back to the east coast of the United States, and this time zone is Greenwich Mean Time -5 right now. Sometimes it's -4 if there's daylight savings, and daylight savings is dumb and whatever. But you get the idea. The more you go west, you go back from Greenwich Mean Time. If you go east, it's the opposite. You go forward to Greenwich Mean Time. So if it's noon at Greenwich, then this next time zone, it'll be 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., etc. So these time zones have been marked up in these kind of strange shapes. Eventually, if you go 12 steps away from Greenwich, 12 time zones, you'll end up here at this mess. This mess is the international dateline.
How the hell has this happened? There's all these little... Like, what's decided this?
This is where Greenwich Mean Time +12 or -12 ends up at this line, which is where a new day starts. So let me give you an example of what this would look like. Imagine it's 4 p.m. in Greenwich, England, right here at this Royal Observatory. It is 4 p.m. GMT on May 28th. If anyone wants to send me a birthday gift, May 28th. May 28th. It's May 28th at 4 p.m. GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. Sitting, chilling in the Royal Observatory, which I've never actually been to. I need to go to the Royal Observatory. I'm going to do that this year, next year, at some point. Okay, so it's 4 p.m., May 28th. Across the ocean here in Washington, D.C. at that time, you can see that we go from 4 p.m. -5, so 11 a.m. Okay, so it's 11 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. at that exact time on May 28th. Head across the United States to the west coast of the United States to Seattle or Portland, and right there it's 3 hours earlier than it is here. You're now at 8 a.m. So it's 8 a.m. here, it's still 4 p.m. in Greenwich. It's still 4 p.m. in London. Now you head into the Pacific Ocean, keep going west until you get to French Polynesia, at which time it's 5 in the morning. You're now GMT -11, it's 5 in the morning. And then you get right up to this messy line. If you were to be in the Baker Islands, which is like a US, like random uninhabited island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, you would be at 4 a.m. So it's 4 p.m. over in Greenwich, it's 4 a.m. on this random island in the Pacific. So then cross this messy looking line, it's still 4 a.m., but now it's the next day. It's May 29th at 4 a.m. Here in Fiji, at the same time, 4 p.m. at Greenwich, it's now 4 a.m. the next day,
So
May
weird.
29th. So
That would be so confusing.
we went from being 12 hours behind Greenwich to being 12 hours in front of Greenwich just by going over this international date line. You could do this exact same thing going the other way. Start heading east and you see that it's 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. Head all the way over into Asia, and now you're getting closer to seeing how that 4 a.m. happens when you get over to Fiji. Now the caveat to all of this is, of course, is that some of these countries switch by an hour for like daylight savings type things and whatever, but ignore that. Imagine there wasn't daylight savings. Right now, in this moment where daylight savings is at least ended in the United States, this holds across the whole world. Someday I'll make a video about this whole messy debacle. But the point of all of this is to say that because of this conference in 1884 to reconcile train timetables and to make maps more uniform, we now have this navigation and time system that rules our whole world. And Britain is just sitting at the center of it, of course. The British Empire may have fallen and the world has moved on from Britain being the center of the world in a lot of ways, but it's still technically the center of the world in a lot of ways. I'm gonna put some links in the description for some of these cool tools that kind of help visualize time zones if you're interested in that sort of thing. But yeah, my question has been answered. I actually didn't know the answer to this question and I went on a deep dive and now I know. So now I'll sit at my desk and I will know the answer to why that's 0, and I think that was worth it. So thanks. Big thank you to Skillshare.
The more you know. I thought it'd be like a reason that was a bit more complex, but it seemed pretty just simple how it happened. World, why is Britain the center of the world? Britain, because we said it is. Britain was just really good at ocean. Let's be honest here, this is also the most practical way to center a map. Nobody wants to cut Asia or America in half. Yeah, possibly, I guess. The rest of the world, stop acting like you're the center of the universe. Britain, but I am the center of the world. But there we go. I thought it was going to be like a story that was like messed up and it involved people being, I don't know, just all these horrible things happening. But I guess it's just trains. Trains are a lot more important than I had realised in my life. But yeah, this is interesting. Hopefully you enjoyed, and until next time, like, subscribe.